Party 13, let's suit up for adventure.
They're the only ones that can save the world.
What?
A fantasy world of magic, monsters, and heroes.
Yeah, hello? Where is that voice coming from?
Heroes like our Patron, the star of our story.
Yeah, that's me, but what are you talking about?
Sorry. We're in a promo for your podcast. Did nobody tell you?
What?
Your podcast. Have Spellbook Will Travel?
Have Spellbook?
It's a scripted fantasy comedy audio drama based on the creator's experiences playing tabletop games.
To be honest, that sounds pretty boring.
Well, it's hilarious. And heartwarming. And great. Super great.
Whatever you say, buddy.
Have Spellbook Will Travel on the Don't Split the Podcast network. Start the adventure at havespellbook.com or wherever podcasts are available for free.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the podcast, I'm talking with James Haeck, editor of Insider magazine and writer of wonderful RPG products, and Michael McCarthy, art director of Insider magazine, Trailseeker, and many other fine publications, as well as an amazing designer creator in his own right. We are going to be talking about how we bring words and images together in the RPG world to create a complete product and what it's like to put out a monthly publication. So, let us dive right into that discussion. All right, everybody, now I am here with James Haeck and Michael McCarthy. Welcome to Tabletop Babble, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here. Before we dive into our discussion about Insider, James, why don't you tell people who you are and what you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Hey, I'm James Haeck. It's great to be on this podcast again. In the world of role-playing games, I do a lot of things. Most prominent on this show today is I'm the editor of N-World Insider, which, as I'm sure we'll get into, is a 5th edition Patreon-based e-zine where we publish 4 5e compatible articles a month and one adventure currently from the award-winning adventure path Zeitgeist, the Gears of Revolution, which we're converting from Pathfinder to 5th edition. Elsewhere, I've done a couple of little things like the Tal'Dorei campaign guide with Matt Mercer.
That little thing.
Yeah. And I contributed to the new Kobold Press Midgard campaign setting as well.
Certainly, among other things. So it is awesome to have you here. And I'm very, very excited to talk with you about Insider and design in general. And then also with us, of course, is the one and only Michael McCarthy. Michael, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
I am a freelancer, mostly. I do stuff all over the place. I write a lot for LPGA Design lately. I did the Crisis of the World Eater campaign that was just released after a Kickstarter last year. I, of course, also am the art director at EN World. I do Insider and Trailseeker and Eon's e-zines. And I recently started my own third-party publishing company called Straight Path Games. It's reimaginings of the rules for Pathfinder in a more simple way, so it's easier to get new players in. It's a similar idea to what 4th edition did to Dungeons & Dragons, except for Pathfinder and a little less severe and requiring so much rebalancing.
Gotcha.
But Straight Path Games, I get it. Nice.
Yeah, straight. See, thank you. A lot of people are like, are you sure you want to make the title straight? I'm like, listen, I'm all for the LGBT community, but straight also has other meanings. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to make the game simple. I want to pick an easy to recognize word. I apologize if that unintentionally offends someone, but it's not intended to. I got called out on that like 5 times
Really?
when I was trying to pick a name.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's simple, it's direct, and it's a nice allusion to what you're doing. Like you said, similar to the 4th edition Essentials line, I believe it was called, but it sounds like a gentler curve so as to not turn people away and turn people off. That's huge work that you're doing, getting new people into the game, and huge work both of you are doing, because both of you are responsible for a lot of people getting started in the business as well with these sort of e-zines that you're running, which is great. And so I wanted to talk with both of you about editing and about art direction, and also about how these magazines get made and are put together. Insider is the one that you work together on. It's made through Patreon. EN World, Morris it was his brainchild, right? It's been coming out for pretty much since the launch of 5th edition, is that correct? But certainly well before there was an OGL and SRD.
Well before we were supposed to. That's exactly it.
And James, you've been there since day one, right? Like, you've been the editor the entire run of this thing.
Yep. I'm very happy that I was, because had I not been in there from day one, I don't think my career in RPGs would be where it is today. So I'm very thankful to being able to be on Insider.
And Michael, it sounds like you're on every e-zine and then some. How long have you been in this art direction game?
It's been a year and a half, maybe 2 years. I think a year and a half since I joined the team. It's been a fair while, but not nearly as long as these magazines have been around.
Nice. Well, it's awesome to have you here. I do love both of your work. So let's dive right in. Who starts the process? I presume you two work together a fair amount. It starts generally, I know, with a pitch, because full disclosure, I have done some work for Insider magazine
Yes.
as well. So
It's how we met.
Yeah, exactly. That was, in fact, I should mention, my very first paid gig in role-playing games was given to me by you, James. So that is Insider holds a very, very special place in my heart, and puts out great content. I am also in addition to being a contributor, I am also a patron of Insider, because it was one of the only sources for a long time that was putting out 5th edition content. So let's talk about that. It starts with a pitch, right? And James, that's sort of your department. You go through those pitches.
Yes. We have an open door policy, basically. We have a website for Insider that basically has my email on it, and it says, pitch us something fitting these guidelines. There are guidelines listed. There are types of articles listed, so that anyone who wants to pitch to Insider can look at that website and get an idea of what we publish and give me a pitch that hopefully is in line with what we like to print. For instance, Insider is very big on new mechanical content. It's actually rather rare to see new mechanical content printed and playtested through Patreon. Often you'll see it on blogs that someone has written up and not given due diligence to iterating on. And we hope that the stuff that Insider produces is able to have that professional touch. And so we look for that over, for instance, advice articles. Advice articles are something that we get pitched a lot of, but our audience sort of views that as blog stuff. Not to be too pejorative about it, because advice articles are excellent. They're crucial to running the game, but people don't like paying for it. And so oftentimes perfectly good pitches all have to say, sorry, but we can't publish this, just because it's not our niche. And that's the hardest part of the pitching process.
Yeah, and that makes sense if people feel like advice is something they can get for free. Maybe they're looking for something a little different if they're opening up their wallets for it. So then, at what point does the Megazord that is both of you? At what point do you come in, Michael, and start thinking about art for these articles?
So once Joey gets the article, he puts it on EN World's shared space. We use Trello. He puts the articles all there, and he gives a snippet as to what the article is about. I assume it's some or most of the pitch.
Yeah, it's either an excerpt or the whole thing, depending on how much I think is relevant.
Right. And so I take that information, and sometimes I need to ask a question like, hey, this article says it's about spells. Could you give me some examples? Or, hey, this article says it's about new NPCs. Could you give me some characters? But he's been very good at handling all of that. So I haven't had to ask him very many questions. And then I go through it and I find the most visually interesting piece, because there's always bits of an article that sell themselves better to art and bits that don't, because some things like enchantment and charm don't work so well as art. I've got a couple of good enchantment pieces, but most of the time they don't work. But others, like using spells as a continued example, evocation and conjuration lend themselves extremely well to art. So if there's a group of spells for like druids, I will go and find more evocation looking ones, things that lend themselves better to the art. Then I go to my stable of artists, and much like when somebody sends a pitch in, people send me portfolios. My email address is instructions on what to send me, because artists normally send in their portfolios, is on the same submission site as the rest of the Insider and Trail Seeker submission details are on. So I will go to my artists and I will pick out usually one, sometimes two artists who I think would be right for a piece. We generally get one piece of custom art per article. Then I write a short description and I tell them to draw it. One thing that I've learned over the past year and a bit, being art director, is you need to give the artist only as much detail as you, like the minimum amount of detail you can. Because the more detail you give, the more times you will be disappointed with the final piece.
So you really like to let your artists run with it. Essentially, you trust your artists to do a good job.
Absolutely, and it's worked out really well for me. Some artists don't turn over what I hope for, and I usually, sometimes I give them a second shot if it's close. But I've had artists turn over terrible, not usable pieces. But generally, I find, unless I'm looking for something specific, like something for an intellectual property, it's always better to be general. Like, I would like a ninja fighting on the rooftops. It should be human. Because when you give them an order like that, they get to decide, what the ninja should be doing. Should the ninja be doing this? Or, like, should there be enemies in the scene? Mm-hmm. Things like that. But if you say, I would like a human ninja standing on the rooftop, they should be wearing a green kimono, and they should have a wakizashi in both hands, and they should be standing on one foot, and they should be using the other foot to kick this oni in the face. It's never going to be what you're looking for, because that's too much detail.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying, and it sort of probably is less fun for the artist, I would imagine, too, to get that prescriptive with it, right?
Exactly. And because it always ends up being more revisions too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The same goes for writing, actually, also. That's why we want people to pitch us their own thing rather than sort of a top-down prescriptive initiative. So sometimes we do that if we have a really strong theme and we want our writers to really focus on something. But usually we just straight up get better work when we allow people to write or draw or paint what they want to create for us.
Being passionate, I think, goes a long way, particularly in an industry like role-playing games, right? Where a lot of what you're doing is passion-based. So that makes perfect sense. And what is your job like, Joey, after, and we should mention, you go by both Joey and James.
It's a middle name, so it's fine. People call me whatever they want.
So after you've been given an article, right? We know that people in general, they pitch, right? And then there's an outline stage, and then they give you an article. What generally is your job once you've gotten that article from them? That first draft, we should say.
Once I get an article from an author, I'll post it to the Trello, just in case the rest of the team needs to see it. It's good to have all the cards face up as much as possible, in my opinion, because it lets people collaborate better. And if Michael needs a more in-depth description, often that will come straight from the first draft. And once I've done that, I'll put it in in a little folder that I keep in my cloud storage that has all of the unfinished manuscripts that I have. And oftentimes it'll sit there for a week or so while I work on other stuff. But once I get to that article, I will go through it. I'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and I will either make revisions directly myself, just by writing over what the author wrote, and that's usually in cases of obvious typos, or I really think that this word would be better. And I'll always use track changes so that once I send it back to the original author, that author can turn around and say, I love this, or I want to contest this. And so leaving that fossil record of my work is really useful, because I'm not perfect. If I make a mistake, I don't want to reflect poorly on the writing of the author, because my job as an editor is to elevate their style. If an article goes to print and I've inadvertently made it worse, then I'm just assassinating someone else's work, and that feels terrible. But once I've done that, once I have track changed these notes and revisions, written little things in the margins, I will email it back to the author who wrote it originally, and I'll say, hey, this is great, or hey, this needs some work, or whatever. And I'll say, you have a week to whip it into shape. Or if it's perfect, which happens sometimes, not often, but it happens, I'll just say, hey, I love this. I'm going to send this to you with whatever minor changes I made to it, so you can see what I did, so you can keep me honest. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, if you see any problems, if you want to do another revision, if you see something that you think I could do better, then just send it to me again within the week, and I'll ship that off instead of what I did. But then once I get a second draft back, I'll go over it again, maybe a little quicker this time because it's already been through the grinder once. And then I'll put this final draft onto the Trello and let the rest of the team handle it from there. In addition to having an editor, me, and an art director, Michael, we also have a layout artist, a graphic designer, Eric Putnam, who's done really tremendous work on Zeitgeist and modern day Insider and all sorts of other stuff. He will take the finalized art that Michael has placed on the Trello and the final draft that I've placed there also, and he will put it into the beautiful final trade dress that you see when you get an Insider article.
And so that's sort of where the marriage comes together. And then, Michael, do you have like final sign-off then once the article is all put together, or everybody trusts Eric and then it just sort of goes out to the Patreon? We trust Eric, but one cool thing about Trello that we make a lot of use of is the tagging feature.
Yes.
So when a new card gets created, there's a bunch of tags that I think are automatically attached to it. I don't know. You create the cards, not me. So there's a bunch of tags that get added. There needs art, needs manuscript, needs layout. So when our step is done, we remove the tag that says needs this, so we can easily tell at a glance, okay, this is done. Okay, this is not done. So like I can look at it right now and say, okay, these two new cards that you've created, they need art. So everybody knows that they're waiting on me for that. As the people who are sort of the gatekeepers of the Insider brand, both of you are looking at a lot of pitches and submissions. What are those things, like specific things that you look for in people's work and people's submissions that makes you think, oh, this would be a great person to work with? I know there's no silver bullet, but what are some qualities that you look for when people do that? From an art perspective, every artist has got different styles. Lately, in particular, I've been looking for more realistic styles because we've been doing more science fiction pieces because of Eons, and probably even more once Starfinder is officially released. And that the style lends itself more to the more realistic style lends itself more to the realistic pieces. But like I said earlier, I try to match the pieces that I'm ordering to the artists. So I've got one artist whose characters are
hit and miss, but whose backgrounds are phenomenal. And I like to give them that one artist anytime I have got just like an empty room. But I have other artists who do really good like comic book style characters. So I want to give them like individual heroes from any articles that are about a class, for instance. And the same, I have some artists who are really good at equipment. So I like to see an artist, when I get a portfolio, I like to see someone who's able to like show a strength, because an artist who's good at a lot of things is probably also got a fairly high rate. And we can't afford to pay a high rate. We're a relatively small company.
I will say that as far as payment goes, I made, for a person who had no professional experience, making 3 cents a word starting out in the RPG industry actually is very good. I think for what you look for sometimes is very fair and very good for people. And I know that Morris is sort of passionate about that, about paying people at least what he can, and a lot of stretch goals. I guess they're not called stretch goals. I don't know what they're called in Patreons. Involve paying people more, right?
Backer rewards.
Yes, yeah, the backer rewards for, as the Patreon gains more and more money, like more people might start to make more, which I think is a great thing. So kudos to you all for that. What about you, Joey? You talked a little bit already about what you sort of look for, but what else do you look for?
Usually I can tell if I want to work with a writer just by how well they construct their pitch. A well-constructed pitch contains a lot of elements. It, of course, involves a solid grasp of English spelling and grammar. If I get a pitch that uses punctuation wildly incorrectly or mixes up the verb tenses, and I'm like, if you didn't care enough to proofread your pitch before you send it to me, I know for a fact you will not care enough to proofread your article before you send it to me. And I'm happiest, this is a little counterintuitive, but as an editor, I'm happiest when I'm not editing very much. Because it means that I'm not meddling with the author's sense of style. It means I get to provide suggestions and give them notes rather than doing their editorial housekeeping, which is great. A happy editor is a productive editor. And so if the grammar of a pitch is bad, it's in the dustbin. Another good quality of pitch is that it is formatted in an easy-to-read and well-lengthed manner. The best pitches that I get are an email that have about 3 different article ideas, because it gives me some choice. Each one of those ideas, it has a bold title, it has well-formatted running text, and it's about a paragraph long each. And while this has little bearing on how well they write an article, it has a great deal of bearing on how experienced they are and how much they've learned, which, someone who doesn't have a lot of experience, we like to bring on new people, but less experience means more work for me. And in a sort of pseudo-technical writing industry like role-playing games, which merges a need for good formatting and use of headers and footers and all of that minuscule mumbo-jumbo, which I'm very familiar with now, a lot of people need a lot of work and training to get familiar with it. And that familiarity is vital.
Yeah, I think that those are all great qualities of people having worked with others now, right? Like, those are great things to look for. If people give what is asked for in your guidelines, I think that shows that, hey, they're going to read, at the very least, the things that you send to them, right?
Yeah, we have it's not a strict style guide, but I like to think that it's a pretty forthright and descriptive style guide. And if they haven't read the style guide, then they don't particularly care about the nuances of our production, which feels harsh to say. Like, a lot of these people, we want to be a gateway into the industry. We want to give people who have never written an RPG supplement a shot at making this glorious distant dream a reality. But it also stands to say that a reality of this industry is you must read your style guides. You must know what your publisher expects of you. And if you haven't figured out their expectations, especially when they make it accessible and clear, then you're not going to make it very far.
Hey everybody, wanted to take a quick break to talk to you about Playground Adventures, a sponsor for this episode of Tabletop Babble. They are a third-party design company for RPG products with a focus on adventures and activities for kids. That's right, you want to introduce your kids to RPGs? Playground Adventures has you covered. They are doing the work of the gods. That's right, husband and wife team Daniel Marshall and BJ Hensley, two giants in the industry, run Playground together. Playground Adventures offers family-friendly gaming for everyone. Adults will have a lot of fun playing and running these adventures too. In fact, sometimes adult groups play them just because they want a change of pace, a different kind of adventure, and this is one way to get something bright and amazing and awesome. Pixies on Parade, which is a super great adventure, and its sequel, Nightmares on Parade, were voted top 10 candidates for Zeitgeist's top 10 in 2015 and 2016. In fact, Nightmares on Parade was voted number 1. You should really check these out. They've got a lot of amazing lines, like the Fun and Facts line, which includes an adventure called For the Hive, where you can learn about bees. They've got After School Adventures, which are short one-shots designed to only take a few hours to complete. Their most popular is a series of shorts in Wonderland that teach people how to play the game. What could be better than hanging out with some great young people, teaching them role-playing games, preparing the industry for the future? It is pretty incredible. The work they are doing is awesome. They do it for Pathfinder, 5th edition, Ponyfinder, and Hero Kids. Check them out at playgroundadventures.net. I've already got a slew of products so that I can bring my nieces and nephews into the fold. You should go check them out as well, playgroundadventures.net. So let's talk a little bit, because I think a lot of people understand the folks who you manage, right? People understand what an author or designer of an article does. People understand, at the basic level what's going on there. People understand at the basic level what is going on when an artist is asked to make a picture. But I don't know that people out there necessarily understand what art direction is, because it is certainly in the same field as what your artists are doing, but it is not the same thing as drawing that picture. So, Michael, how would you define what you do, art direction? Because I know you are also a talented artist and designer and writer in your own right, but how would you define art direction for what you do?
Well, most of art direction is organizing everything, because I need to keep track of how many artists do I currently have active. Like, by active I mean like that I go to on a regular. I have 14, 15, 16 artists that I need to deliver orders to, and then I need to keep track of when those orders are due. And most of the time, I try to send them out all on one day, so they're all due on one day, and I can keep track of them more easily. But sometimes they come in over the course of the month, and I have to track them here and there. But then there's also the other side of the job, is making sure the art is good. Sometimes it is not, and sometimes it is just barely good enough, and I'll let that slip through. I got called out on that with a piece just a little while ago where I said, it's just good enough, and I got called out, and I'm like, and Russ was like, this art is not quite good enough. And I'm like, sorry, I thought it was. No, I won't use the artist again. Portfolios aren't always a really accurate description of someone's work. They're obviously cherry-picked that person's best work. So they're always a good idea of what that person does, but they're not a perfect idea. So I've got to keep an eye on which artists are turning over good work, which artists are turning over fast work, which artists are away, which artists I've given a lot of work to lately, which artists I have not given work to lately. It's mostly managing contractors, artists, freelancers, whatever word you want to use for them.
I would ask the same of you, James. Like, you're doing a ton of editing over there, but I know you also do a ton of game design. I know you occasionally draw some maps for the things that you're working on and that sort of thing. How is editing different from writing and authoring and game design?
It's a totally different beast, but it's related enough that being good at editing makes me a better writer, and being a good writer makes me a better editor. And I'll do my best to explain that. And this is going to sound obvious, but my explanation will compound on it. Editing involves taking a work that is ostensibly complete, looking it over for errors or places where it's weak, places where the description can be shored up, and letting the author know that so that they can improve their work. It's not about being a co-author or a sous chef. It's about helping the author achieve their best voice. It's about making sure that all the crap falls away and the purest distillation of what the author really, really wanted to say comes through clearly to the audience. And it involves a level of aerial view. Like, instead of being a writer who is kind of a ground level explorer and trailblazer and creator, an editor is like the scout plane flying at 20,000 feet, looking out at the broader strokes of the geography that they've created. Because you have to make sure that, in addition to all of the details working out, you have to make sure that the structure of a piece flows properly as well. And this is especially true in this pseudo-technical writing field, because what order readers learn information can have a massive impact on how a text is ultimately read. Let's say there's an article about new subclasses for a druid. Let's say if you make some assumptions, the audience already knows what druids are and how they function. But if you end up having a poorly organized article, if things aren't listed alphabetically, or things come in, and this seems dumb, but I've seen it happen, the subclass abilities are in the wrong level order. If those don't work out in exactly the right order, the audience gets confused and they get angry, and they have a harder time using the game supplement. Because the game supplement is meant to be used on the fly quickly. It's not meant to be homework. So the final and most important duty of the editor is making sure that game material is fun and easy to use and not a chore. And you can see that idea evolve in game design between the 1970s and now. Some of those older pieces, before they had an editing staff that knew that, they're kind of a chore to get through. Unimportant details are highlighted, whereas the important stuff, well, the lead has been buried. Editors are here to unbury that lead.
That's important. And editors, it just helps to know there's going to be a second set of eyes. Certainly be kind to your editors, right? Proofread your stuff, read over and revise your stuff before you send it. Don't just send a mass of words to an editor, because that's just very unprofessional. Not good writing. You're essentially asking your editor to write it, right?
And when we're mad, we rewrite, and you don't want us to rewrite.
That's right, exactly. But knowing that second set of eyes is there, and knowing that there is somebody who is going to say to you, you lost the point here. Like, you went off on this crazy tangent, as we nerds and game designers are wont to do, is an important thing to have. And it's also an important thing to have someone there who is doing that hard work of looking at it and approaching it. And it's the same reason Hollywood has test audiences and everybody else. Editors are there because they want this product to succeed.
Often those tangents are really good. Mm-hmm. The hardest part of editing might be cutting awesome stuff just because it doesn't support the overall structure of the piece.
Yeah, you're there to kill the darlings that don't make sense being in there. But, for somebody who probably publishes monthly material, it's also helpful to say, maybe this is an article in itself, right? There's always that second chance, which is great. So this is one thing I really want to talk to you both about. The melding of art and words together in a role-playing game product. How do we get those things to work well together, and how do we pick, there's only so many things you can illustrate given your budget and, the length of, say, an adventure, right? How do we pick what thing in that adventure to pull out and illustrate after our maps and everything are done? So just talk to me a little bit about that process of bringing together art and the words, and we can use Insider as an example, or any other products you guys have worked on is totally fine.
There was a point back when I started when Joey did almost the entire art orders himself. He would find the most interesting part and detail it. It's like I was saying earlier, there are different things that lend themselves better to art. It's actually really easy to work from a pitch to get the art order, because the pitch is already really distilled down to the most interesting part of the article. Insider uses a lot of public domain stock art, as well as the color art we commission, which usually goes on the front page along with the title and sort of the intro for the article itself. But usually working from the pitch is actually very easy, because the author has already found the most exciting, interesting thing about the article, whether it's a couple of new spells or whether it's a monster or a main character in an adventure. It's about finding something that players will want to see, because a lot of art is just around to look pretty, but you also really want it to show it to the players. Be like, this is the monster you're fighting. This is the character you're talking to. This is the scene you're seeing. This or a handout. This is the map that somebody gives you of the location you're in. You really want it to be useful to the players to help them get into the article or the scene.
Nice. And Joey, what about you? How do you bring together art and text?
I'd almost forgotten about the time when I wrote out all the art orders. And I'm so immensely grateful that you are doing that now, Michael. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's such a load off my shoulders to not have to do that anymore. And I think actually the quality of our work has improved for it. Not because I'm bad at writing art orders, but because to a certain point, having more eyes on a piece of work helps tunnel vision. I often feel I get bogged down in things that interest me personally. Even the editor can miss the forest for the trees sometimes. And having someone who is detached to work on the one cool thing that you see, Michael, is an immense boon. I'm really pretty far removed from the art. When a good art piece comes in, I clap my hands and a big smile comes up on my face and I go, yay, this art is awesome. Because, and I'm guilty of this, I know that RPG readers will often skim the text until they find a good piece of artwork to reel them back in. When I'm going through a new hardback adventure from Wizards of the Coast, for instance, I got my hands on Storm King's Thunder for the first time, which is jam-packed with awesome art. I would often go through the text and my eyes would glaze over after reading 5 paragraphs in a row, and I would need an awesome shot of a storm giant fighting a fire giant to remind me, oh, right, this adventure is full of awesome, epic stuff. I should read a little bit closer. And so that's exactly it. Whereas the text is I can't say it's the most important part. While the text is the game part, the part that people will use most importantly at the table, the art is there to inspire the game master or the player to create. Ideally, the text is inspirational as well, but the text's most important purpose is to provide a mechanical chassis that makes the game run. The art is there to let people's imaginations run wild.
I liked what you were saying, too, about the hardcovers, because that is true. even if you love this stuff, because it can get bogged down in the sort of technical writing of it all, it can feel a little like you're reading a user manual at certain points. And so to have the art to draw you back in is great. I still think about when I was leafing through Curse of Strahd for the first time, and I saw Piddlewick 2, who is this evil marionette that moves on its own, a medieval fantasy Chucky, if you will. And that being like that picture still haunts me when I think about it, right? So there's certainly some really powerful things that can be done with art. And then me thinking immediately, I gotta look at this guy's statistics. Like, what does this stat block look like, right? Is this what I think it is? And yeah, I think really going hand in hand, allowing the art to draw people in is very important. And, it's become one of those things that has become, as I make my own products occasionally and stuff, like, it becomes important to me to think about, like, okay, it's a good idea to, if you can afford it, spring for art or go to Drive Through RPG and see what people are offering as far as art goes. Some people offer art that you can buy as stock art you can use in commercial products there, and it's great. So, those are all things that should be checked out and pursued when you are writing a product, particularly if you have a cover. And Michael, I'm wondering if you might indulge us with a little bit of talk about cover art.
So I don't get to order a whole lot of covers.
Sure.
Most of our pieces are as magazines and as PDFs. We don't do full covers for them. We do use our art for the cover, sort of for the front page, the one that gets the big preview on the Patreon. Mm-hmm. But we do order a couple of covers, not for Insider, but we've done some really big adventures in Eon's magazine, and we've done some covers for some other products that I don't think I can talk about because they're on intellectual property and they haven't been...
Better to not say Judge Dredd or anything else, for instance. Right. So,
yes. Well, Judge Dredd has been announced.
Yes.
I believe.
Yes. Yeah. That was why I picked it.
That's how you know it. That's how you know about it. That makes sense. Judge Dredd, as a sidebar, I was disappointed in that. I did order a cover for Judge Dredd, and there was a combination of people looking at it that gave thumbs up, and then they came back near the end of the process and they're like, wait a second, we don't like this art style, and we had to scrap it.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah. That sidebar aside, covers are exciting when I get to do them because I don't get to do very many of them. And there's a few things that are always very important with a cover. First, mechanically, it needs to be either a full page or part of a clear full page piece, like the now and old and new rule books. They have a half a page of art and a half a page of this is the now core rule book on it, and they're very pretty, but they're only a half a page for the cover, and they need to be at 300 DPI, which is art speak for print quality, because if it's good, you don't need a cover on a PDF. Covers are pretty, but they're there for being there on your bookshelf. So you need to be prepared to print them. But then you get into the more the details of the piece itself. It's nice to have a lot of detail, but it's always very important to be focused in on one thing. Because even though it's a big art piece, you want to get across the entire subject of the article. You need to keep it focused. Like, the Pathfinder Core Rulebook is a great example of a cover. There's a whole lot going on, but it's really dominated by this dragon on the cover and these adventurers fighting the dragon. In the now Core Rulebook, we've got a car chase with a bunch of stuff going on. There's explosions in the background, and there's this briefcase that's dangling out of a car window and a helicopter. But it's really clear what's going on is the character in the car is this undercover cop driving away from this like FBI style agent who's hanging at the side of the helicopter. And even though there's a lot going on, it's very clear what's going on. And it's even more important in a cover than in a regular, like a quarter page art piece that we use for a day-to-day article to get the clarity there. Because in a quarter page article, you're usually getting one character and sometimes a background.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting a lot of pieces. The focus is going to be automatic.
Sure.
But when you have a cover, there's going to be a lot going on. It's going to have a lot of detail. The focus needs to be clear. Like you need to have a central figure and a central thing happening. Another story for a cover, the Varanthia Codex. I did not write the art order for the Varanthia Codex.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at it right now, you will see that there's this crazy half-orc wielding a staff and a bunch of chaos happening in the distance. It took me a long time to convince Mike that he needed to have a character on the front of the cover, because at the beginning he wanted to just order this giant war zone of like a bunch of planes coming in from one side and a bunch of dragons coming in from another side and a bunch of soldiers coming in from another side. And it's like, no, you need to have a character in the focus, because people are going to see 1,000 little things and they're not going to focus on the piece, because it really needs to sell what the book is about.
Yeah, absolutely. The cover is so important, and now, particularly in an age of digital products, you can scroll through like your Netflix queue. It becomes even more important in getting people's attention and getting them to pick up on like, hey, maybe this is a Patreon, or maybe this is a drive-through RPG product that I'm interested in picking up the PDF of. So that is super, super important.
Something else that's important, but it's not always even possible to do, is your cover needs to be visible from a thumbnail. Because on Drive-Thru RPG, for example, you're not seeing the cover at full size. You're seeing it at maybe 1 inch by 1.5 inches, compared to 8.5 by 11, like it was designed for. So it needs to be clear enough from a super, super shrunk down what it's about.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's telling a story. The old picture is worth 1,000 words. I suppose is cheesy, but true in this case, right? Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you both coming on here to Tabletop Babble. I think that is going to do it for this episode. But before we go, James Haeck, where can people find you?
I am most active on Twitter, and I am at James J. Haeck. Haeck is spelled Haeck. And that's where you'll find me on Twitter. And of course, you can find me on EN World, Managing Insider, and the submissions page. And before I go, I just want to really reiterate something you said earlier in this podcast, James, to all indie RPG or DMs Guild publishers out there, is that if you have something awesome, you have a great adventure or other RPG supplement, and you don't have art, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Find that stock art. Find something that will make you, that will separate you from the crowd. And art does that. Art separates you from the crowd.
Yes, as you can see, if you Google the Temple of Shattered Minds, an amazing cover, one might say, on a DM's Guild product, featuring a big old mind flare looking pretty awesome.
Oh, and speaking of that, the artist who did that, Ellis Goodson, is someone who I found because of Mike's art direction. I found Ellis through Insider. And if you're that just goes to show that if you are a designer, you should be looking at everyone who works in your field. Look at the credits pages for everything, because if you want to publish, someday you're going to need a writer, you're going to need an editor, an artist, a graphic designer, you're going to need everyone. So you'd better know who does good work.
Very true. And Mike, where can people find you?
I social media badly, but you can still find me on Twitter at Ronar Corruption. I would have liked it to be Ronar's Corruption, which is my email, but it's too long for Twitter. Twitter is all about brevity. Ronar's Corruption is my email at gmail.com. RONARSCORRUPTION. It's long. I've had it for ages. It's my home campaign setting. Even though I'm not very active on Twitter, I'm still around there, and you can get a hold of me through that. But email works best by far.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on Tabletop Babble today. I appreciate everything you all do for this wonderful hobby of ours and this community. So it really is important to me, the work that you do. And thanks for giving me my first job, James.
No problem. Thank you for doing awesome work.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. That was a great podcast. I love to hear how the sausage gets made. Very, very special thank you to my guests for coming on. They are amazing human beings. You know, Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and the best way to help us is to help us grow, and you can do that by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Even if you don't have an iTunes account, odds are the podcatcher app you're using uses the same algorithms that iTunes uses to recommend podcasts. So if you want to help us out, make an account. It takes 30 seconds. You can rate us and all of the other podcasts you love. And as a bonus, I read one 5-star review verbatim each episode and credit the person who left it. Make me say anything you want in these reviews. Today's 5-star review comes from Murik. Perhaps Merrick? Merrick Blackman? I don't know. We'll see. This review is entitled, James is Great. And it says, James makes this show. He is a great host and is obviously super passionate. Well, thank you so much, Merrick, for this review and for leaving it. Super, super appreciate you listening and super, super appreciate your review. People, if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at James Introcaso, or you can check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.me. Before we go, I want to recommend another podcast on the Don't Split the Podcast Network to you all. You guys should check out DSPN Presents. It is a podcast where we do a lot of one-shot actual plays of new systems or new adventures or that kind of thing. We bring on guest DMs and we bring in, the cast of Have Spellbook Will Travel. We bring in the Venture Maidens. We bring in the Dames and Dragons. And we play some adventures and have a good time. If you subscribe, you'll also find that eventually we'll be putting out pilots of new podcasts there. We'll be putting out special interviews and panels that are done at conventions and that sort of thing. It's going to be all of the hosts you love on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. You can check it out right now. There's a couple of amazing games on there. Craig Campbell came and ran Murders and Acquisitions for us. Rich Howard, the amazing Rich Howard, ran us through a 5th edition aquatic D&D actual play, and Chris Snezak came and ran Star Trek Adventures. All of those are really fun and amazing to listen to. Check it out. You are going to love it. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by BattleBards. Remember, RPGs are like sex. Hey everybody, one more word from our sponsor for this episode. Kobold Press is a third-party design company for RPG products with a range of books and supplements on monsters, adventures, and settings for both Pathfinder, D&D, 13th Age. They've got a lot of general RPG advice in their Kobold Guide 2 lines. They're incredible. Wolfgang Bauer, who is a well-known game designer who's been writing since the 90s for Dungeon Magazine. He worked for Wizards of the Coast. He is an amazing dude, and he started this. In fact, you can hear him talk on this very podcast. His premier product is the Midgard setting, a game-neutral setting that had a super successful Kickstarter this year. It is awesome. If you are into dark fantasy, and who isn't, check it out. And now they have a Patreon that's going to launch new material on a regular basis. This Patreon is for a magazine, if you will, called Warlock. It's going to have a lot of new 5e material that you can check out, new maps, new monsters, new character options. It's going to have so much awesomeness. You should check it out. There are already incredible people working on this. I am a patron, and there's been some amazing art and imagery coming out of this thing. You really, really should go to patreon.com/koboldpress and check out Warlock. That's patreon.com/koboldpress. Check out Warlock. You're going to get amazing content for like $1 a month if you want to. You can always up your pledge if you want to get even more goodies from the great kobolds. All right, go to patreon.com/koboldpress.